A son carries the name? You just rent it. My father slid a loan packet across the dinner table and told me to sign. Sign here, here, and here. The papers put my half of the family storefront on the line. The building I'd opened alone at 440 every morning for 6 years as collateral for my brother's secret debts. My brother sat right there and said nothing. My mother folded her hands and nodded like they'd asked me to pass the salt instead of hand over the only thing I'd ever earned. And my father was smiling because he was sure I'd sign. I always signed. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I kept my pen and set it down beside the papers very gently. The way you set down something you intend to pick back up. They thought the meeting was a formality. They thought the building was half theirs to mortgage and half mine to surrender. What they didn't know was the one question the closing agent would ask out loud 6 weeks later in a glass conference room with my brother's lender watching. That turned that smile inside out before noon because the title to that building had held exactly one name for 6 years. And it wasn't the name they thought. For now. Picture me capping that pen while everyone waited for me to break. The storefront sits on the corner of Maple and 3rd, a narrow brick building with a green awning my grandmother repainted herself the year she turned 70. Ground floor is the bakery, Hartwell's. My family's name in gold leaf on the window. 2 small apartments upstairs. It has been the center of our family for 30 years. And for the last 6 of those years, I have opened it at 4:40 every morning. I scale the recipes, I do payroll, I close out the register at night and reconcile it against the deposits. When the walk-in compressor died in February, I was the one who called the repair company and the one who paid the invoice. My parents like to say the bakery is the family's heart. What they mean is that it's the family's wallet and I am the hand that keeps it open. Let me show you a regular morning so you understand what they were so eager to mortgage. 4:40, I unlock the back door. The ovens take an hour to come up to temperature, so they go on first before the lights, before the coffee for myself. I pull the proofing trays I set the night before. I weigh flour on a scale older than I am. A brass and iron thing my grandmother bought secondhand in 1991. By 5:30, the laminated dough is in. By 6, the first regulars are knocking on the glass. A retired bus driver named Walt, who orders the same plain croissant he's ordered for 9 years. A night shift nurse named Priya, who comes in still in scrubs, smelling of the hospital. They know my name. They tip the counter girl. Not me, because they assume I'm just the owner's daughter filling in. That's the thing nobody in my family ever grasped. The bakery isn't a building that makes money. It's 400 small decisions a day, every one of them mine, made before the rest of the world is awake. My father came by maybe twice a year. He'd stand in the middle of the floor in his good coat, survey the line out the door like a landlord inspecting his holdings, and say something like, "Good crowd today. The Hartwell name still means something." Then he'd take a coffee without paying and leave. My mother came less. When she did, it was to pick up a cake for one of her bridge events, and she always wanted it free. And she always introduced me to her friends as my daughter. She helps with the family shop, helps as if I were a volunteer, as if the shop ran itself and I happened to be standing near it. My brother Lawson is 2 years older than me. He has never worked a shift. He has, however, represented the family at a great many lunches, and somewhere in those lunches, he accumulated debts that nobody at our dinner table would name. For most of my life, Lawson was an idea more than a person, the idea of who the Hartwells were going to become. There was always a deal he was almost in on, a partner he was almost going to land, a future that was always one introduction away. My parents financed that future the way some people feed a slot machine, certain the next pull would pay for all the others. And every time the machine took their money, the bill somehow drifted toward me. A family loan that was never repaid, a temporary cover of his rent that ran 2 years. The Christmas, my father quietly asked if the bakery could lend Lawson $8,000 for a venture that evaporated by spring. I'd said no to that one. It was the first time I'd said no to anything. And my mother didn't speak to me for a month. And I learned that in our family. The word No cost more when it came from me. So when my father called about a refinance, I already knew before any of us sat down that the number on the other end of it would be Lawson's. The loan meeting was set for a Sunday afternoon at my parents' house, the same dining table where my father announced every decision he'd already made. "It's just a refinance," he said. "We pull equity out of the building. Lawson clears what he owes. The family stays whole." "Whose equity?" I asked. My mother looked at me like I'd cursed in church. "The family's, Henrietta. Don't make this ugly." There was a manila folder under my father's elbow. He didn't open it. I noticed it anyway. "You'll sign," he said. Not a question. And here's the part I didn't say out loud. I'd seen that building's paperwork more recently than he had, which is why when he slid the packet across, my hands didn't shake. Before I go any further, if this is already tightening something in your chest, take a second to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps this story reach other people who've been the one the family leans on. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read every single one, and I like knowing how far this travels. I'm Henrietta. I'm 31, and what you just heard was the calm before a question. I'd been waiting 6 years for someone to ask out loud. So, let me get back to that table to understand why my father could say, "You just rent it and feel righteous about it." You have to understand the math my family ran on me from the beginning. When I was 9, Lawson broke a neighbor's window with a baseball. I was inside doing homework. My father grounded me for not watching him. That was the year I learned my version of events was worth nothing in that house. That's the whole flashback. I'm not going to take you on a tour of my childhood because the pattern never changed. Only the dollar amounts. Lawson was the name. I was the upkeep. What did change was my grandmother, Vivian Hartwell. She was the one who built the bakery, who taught me to laminate dough at the steel table when I was small enough to need a stool. She watched the math being run on me for years and said very little. Vivian was not a woman who said much. She was a woman who kept records. 6 years ago, when her health started to slip, she moved in upstairs above the shop so she could keep an eye on the ovens. That was her phrase. She kept an eye on a great deal more than the ovens. It turned out she died 4 years ago in the spring, after the funeral. My father gave a speech about legacy and the family name. My mother cried beautifully. Lawson posted a photo of the awning, and then everyone went back to assuming the building was simply theirs. A shared family asset. Half my parents, half mine in some vague way that could be voted on whenever Lawson needed something. That assumption is the whole story. Hold on to it, because the day after Vivian's funeral, I'd received a letter I told no one about. The letter came from a law office 2 towns over. Plain envelope. My name in careful handwriting on the front. Henrietta Hartwell. Inside was a short note from an attorney named Gerald Whitfield, asking me to call at my convenience regarding a matter your grandmother arranged some years ago. I assumed it was sentimental. A keepsake. A savings bond. Maybe the recipe box. I drove out the following week. Whitfield's office smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco. He was somewhere past 70, slow-moving, precise. He'd been Vivian's lawyer for over 30 years since before I was born. "Your grandmother," he said, did not trust easily, but she trusted carefully. "There's a difference." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a deed. I had seen a deed before. I didn't understand at first what I was looking at. Then I read the name on the line where the owner goes. It wasn't Hartwell family. It wasn't my father Edmund. It wasn't joint anything. It was one name. Mine, Henrietta Vivian Hartwell, sole owner. Recorded 6 years ago. 2 years before she even died. "She transferred the building to you while she was still living," Whitfield said quietly. "A grant's deed fully recorded. She kept the right to live upstairs until her death. Nothing more. Everything else, the land, the building, the storefront, became yours the day she signed." I sat very still. "Does my father know your grandmother was explicit that he not be told?" He folded his hands. She wanted to see how the family treated the building when they believed it was theirs to divide. She told me, and I wrote this down. A person shows you who they are when they think they're spending someone else's money. I asked him why. Why me? Why not split it? Why not just leave it in a will like a normal person? Why a secret deed years before anyone needed to know? Whitfield took his glasses off and cleaned them with a cloth from his pocket, slowly. The way old men buy themselves time to choose words. Because a will gets contested, he said. A will gets read in a room where the loudest person wins. Your grandmother had spent a lifetime watching the loudest person in your family win. He set the glasses back on his nose. A recorded deed isn't an opinion, it's a fact. She wanted you to have a fact, Henrietta. Something they couldn't argue you out of with feelings, and the 6 years before she died. Why so early? So that by the time it mattered, the question of whether she was competent would already be settled with witnesses long before anyone thought to ask it. She told me your father would call her senile the day he found out. She wanted the record to be 6 years old by then. He almost smiled. She was a very careful woman. I built her a great deal over 30 years and she questioned every line. I respected her enormously. I drove home that night and didn't tell a soul. Not because I was scheming, because I didn't yet understand what I was holding. It would take 4 years and a manila folder under my father's elbow before I did. For 4 years. I let the family go on believing what they wanted to believe. I know how that sounds. People always ask me the same thing. How could you sit there and let them talk about your building like it was theirs? The honest answer is that owning something on paper and feeling like you own anything in your own family are two very different things, and I only had one of them. So, I kept opening at 4:40. I kept the books, and I watched. I watched my father refer to the storefront as our building at Thanksgiving. I watched my mother tell her bridge friends that the children will split it someday. I watched Lawson borrow against a future stake in a property he had never legally touched. And slowly, without quite deciding to, I started keeping records the way Vivian had. Not out of malice, out of a feeling I couldn't name yet. The feeling you get when you're holding a card nobody knows you have. And the game keeps getting bigger. I scanned every invoice. I saved every text where my father called the building hours. I kept the repair receipts in my own name. When Lawson asked me to co-sign a small thing 2 years ago, I said I'd think about it, and then I quietly photographed the loan application he'd left on the counter. His debts weren't small. They had commas. I want to be honest about the loan application because it's the piece that mattered most later. And I don't want you thinking I went looking for it. Lawson came into the shop on a Tuesday 2 years ago. The kind of Tuesday where it's pouring and nobody comes in and the day stretches long. He had a folder with him. He wanted me to co-sign. Just to strengthen the file, he said. Dad already said yes. It's basically done. He set the folder on the counter while he went to use the restroom. The way he set everything down, expecting someone else to mind it, I didn't open it to snoop. I moved it so it wouldn't get wet by the sink, and it fell open. And I saw the figure at the bottom. I won't say the number, but it was not a small thing. It was a number that would take a person a decade to climb out of. And it was attached to no business I'd ever heard him name. I photographed it. I told myself it was so I'd know what I was being asked to co-sign when he came back. I said I'd think about it. I never signed. He never mentioned the folder again, and I think he forgot I'd ever seen it. I kept the photo for 2 years. I almost deleted it a dozen times. Something stopped me. The same something my grandmother must have felt. All those years keeping records of a family that didn't know they were being recorded. I never planned to use any of it. I told myself I was just being careful. Then this spring, my father called a family meeting about a refinance and the manila folder appeared. The Sunday of the meeting, I got there early. My mother was setting out coffee. Lawson was on his phone in the den, not looking up. My father was at the head of the table with the loan packet squared in front of him and that manila folder tucked underneath. Sit, my father said. I sat. He walked through it like a man reading a verdict. The bakery was doing well. That was the problem in a sense, because it meant the building had equity. Lawson had obligations. A cash-out refinance would pull money against the building's value, pay off what Lawson owed, and protect the family name. And to do that, my father said, the lender needs every owner to sign. Your mother, me, and you. There it was. He believed I was a partial owner. He had no idea I was the only one. I want you to understand how confident he was. He had a printed agenda. He had folders for each of us with our names on tabs like we were a board he was chairing. He'd already chosen the lender. I would later learn, told the loan officer that the building was a family asset held by 3 relatives, which is why the paperwork came to the closing drawn that way. He had built the entire machine on a single assumption he had never once checked. My mother poured the coffee. Lawson sat across from me with his arms folded. The way you sit when the decision's been made, and you're just waiting for the formality to clear. Read me the part I said about what happens if the payments stop. My father flipped a page. There's no scenario where the payments stop. Read it anyway. He didn't read it. He talked over it, the way he always talked over anything that might slow him down. That was the tell. A man who has read the fine print doesn't need to drown it out. How much are we pulling out? I asked. He named a number. It was large enough that if the bakery had a bad year, the building could be at risk. And if Lawson can't make the payments. My father's jaw tightened. He will, but if he can't, I said. The building's collateral. We could lose it. We won't lose anything, my mother said. If you stop creating problems and sign. That was when my father said it. He slid the packet toward me, smiling, and delivered the line he'd clearly been saving. A son carries the name Henrietta. You just rent it. Lawson is the future of this family. Your job is to support him. Sign. The room went quiet. Lawson finally looked up from his phone, smirking, waiting for me to fold like I always had. I picked up the pen. I capped it. I set it down. I'd like to read it first, I said. My father's smile thinned. There's nothing to read. It's standard. Then it won't matter if I read it. I slid the packet back across the table unsigned, and that was the moment, the small, quiet moment when my mother's hand stopped moving over her coffee cup, and my father realized for the first time in 31 years that he didn't actually know what I was going to do. I took the packet home to review. That night, I read every page, and reading it, I understood what my grandmother had wanted me to see 4 years too early. The refinance documents listed the property owners as Edmund Hartwell, Diane Hartwell, and Henrietta Hartwell, 3 equal parties. Someone had simply assumed. The lender had been told the building was a family-held asset and had drafted the paperwork accordingly, requiring all 3 owners to sign as guarantors. But there was no joint deed. There was only Vivian's recorded grantor's deed transferring the property to me alone 6 years ago. My parents had never been on the title, not once, not for a single day, which meant they were trying to mortgage a building they didn't own by getting the actual owner, me, to sign as if she were merely 1/3 of it. I called Gerald Whitfield the next morning. He listened, then was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother, he said slowly, would have called this the test arriving. What do I do? Nothing dramatic, he said. You let the process come to you. A refinance like this has a closing. There will be a title search. There always is. A title company can't issue a policy without confirming who actually owns the property. When they pull the record, the truth surfaces on its own. You won't have to say a word. You'll simply have to be in the room when they read it. And if I just told my father now, then he'd have weeks to spin it, to call me a liar, to pressure you in private. Whitfield's voice was dry. Your grandmother spent 6 years setting a table. Henrietta, don't flip it over before the guests arrive. I understood. The reveal had to happen where it couldn't be argued with, in front of the lender, on the record. There's one more thing, Whitfield said before I hung up. You need to be at peace with what happens after. I've seen people win the room and lose the family in the same hour. Sometimes that's the right trade. But it is a trade. I want you to walk in knowing the price. I thought about that for a long moment, about the price. I've been paying that price my whole life, I said. I'd just like for once to get something for it. He was quiet. Then your grandmother said almost exactly those words to me the day she signed. I'll have the certified copy ready for you. Come by before the closing. So I did something that 4 years earlier I never would have had the spine to do. I called my father and told him I'd sign at the closing. He was thrilled. That's the part that still sits strange with me, how happy he was. I knew you'd come around. He said you're a good girl underneath all the stubbornness. The closing was set for a Thursday morning in mid-June at the title company's office downtown. A glass-walled conference room on the 9th floor. The lender would send a representative. The title company would send a closing agent. My parents would be there. And because the loan was for his benefit, so would Lawson. In the 3 weeks between, the family treated me with a warmth I hadn't felt since I was small. My mother called to ask about my week. Lawson texted me a thumbs up and the word, "Appreciate you, sis," which was more words than he'd sent me in a year. My father told a cousin at a barbecue that Henrietta finally understands what family means. I let it happen. I won't pretend it didn't reach something in me. That old, stupid hope that this time support would be answered with love instead of just spent. There was one evening, about 10 days before the closing, that nearly undid me. My mother invited me to dinner. Just the two of us, she said, which had never once happened in my adult life. She made the pot roast she used to make when I was small, the one good thing I associated with her. We sat at the kitchen table, and for almost an hour, she was a different woman. She asked about the shop, really asked, and she laughed at something I said, and when I got up to leave, she hugged me at the door and held on a second longer than usual. I drove home shaking because for one whole hour I'd had the mother I'd wanted my entire life. And I knew that the only reason I had her was that they needed my signature. The cruelest thing my family ever did to me wasn't the coldness. It was showing me 10 days before I'd lose them exactly what warmth would have felt like, and letting me understand it was always available. They just never thought I was worth spending it on until they wanted something. I almost called it off. I sat in my car outside my own apartment with my phone in my hand, ready to tell Whitfield I just signed the thing, give Lawson the money, keep the mother who made pot roast. Then I remembered the line. A son carries the name, you just rent it. And I understood that the pot roast was the rent, one warm dinner in exchange for everything I owned. I put the phone down. The next morning, I drove out to see Gerald Whitfield one more time. He gave me a certified copy of the deed, the recording stamp clear at the top, and a single sealed letter. What's this? Your grandmother wrote it 6 years ago, he said. She asked me to give it to you on the day the family found out, not before I put it in my bag. I didn't open it. 3 days before closing. I stayed late at the shop after we'd locked up and I built the folder. I spread everything across the steel table, the same table where she taught me dough, the certified deed, the county recording confirmation, 4 years of repair invoices, each one in my name, each one a small, unnoticed proof that I'd been the owner in every way. But the believing. The screenshots of my father's texts. Let's get the awning redone on our building. The shop is doing great this quarter. Our property taxes are due. His own words, year after year, building the case that he'd believed the building was his. Which was exactly what made she manipulated Grandma impossible. You can't be tricked out of something you spent 6 years certain you already owned. And the photograph of Lawson's loan application. 2 years old. The number at the bottom that I'd never been able to unsee. I organized it the way Whitfield organized things in order, indexed, so that if I ever had to lay it out, each page would answer the question the last one raised. I wasn't sure I'd use any of it. I told myself again that I was just being careful. I'm not sure that was ever fully true. Lawson almost caught me. He'd stop by. He did that sometimes now that he was being nice to me, just checking in. And I heard his key in the front door. The old key my parents still had a copy of. I swept the pages into the folder and slid it under the register tray 2 seconds before he walked in. "Working late?" he said. "Always," I said. He looked around the shop. The dark ovens. The clean steel table with an expression I couldn't read. "It's a good place. Hen," he said, almost quiet. "You keep it really nice." For a second, I thought he meant it. Then he added, "It'll be good to have it sorted out after Thursday. Get everything settled." And I understood that settled meant mortgaged, and that even his rare kindness was just the warm-up to the ask. Thursday. I agreed and walked him to the door and locked it behind him and went back to the folder. I put it all in a plain one. Manila. It felt fitting. The night before the closing, Lawson called me, not texted. Called. "Hey," he said. "So, tomorrow. I said. There was a pause, and for a second, I thought he might actually say something true. "Look, I know you do a lot with the shop. I just want you to know, I see it." I sat down on the edge of my bed. 11 years old again. For 1 second. Wanting to believe my brother had finally turned into someone who saw me. "Then why am I the one pledging my half, so you can clear your debts?" I asked. The pause this time was different. Colder, because that's how it works. "Hen?" "Dad's right. The shop carries the name. You carry the shop." He laughed a little. "Don't overthink it. Just sign and we're all good." And there it was. The same math, said gently this time, which was almost worse. I didn't argue. I said goodnight. I hung up, and I sat in the dark for a long while, and I let myself feel the exact size of it. That even now, the kindest thing my brother could imagine was thanking the help. I waited for the hurt to make me reckless. It didn't. It made me calm. I set out my clothes for the morning. Navy. The certified deed and my folder went in my bag beside my grandmother's unopened letter. Then I slept better than I had in years. The title company's office was all glass and gray carpet, the kind of place designed to make signatures feel inevitable. The conference room had a long table and a view of the river. I got there first. I chose the seat at the far end where I could see the door. I'd gone in early on purpose. I wanted a few minutes alone in that room before it filled. I set my bag on the floor by my chair. I put my hands flat on the cool table and I breathed. I thought about my grandmother at the steel table, flour to her elbows, telling me. I was maybe 10, that the trick to laminating dough was patience. "Cold hands," she'd say. "You rush it. The butter breaks through and ruins the layers. You wait, you fold, you wait. The whole thing depends on not being in a hurry to finish." She wasn't talking about dough. I understand that now. She'd been teaching me how to wait 6 years before she ever recorded the deed. My parents arrived together. My father in his good blazer, my mother in pearls, both of them performing ease. Lawson came in behind them, sunglasses pushed up on his head, already checking his phone. "There she is," my father said, warm for the audience. "My responsible one." The lender's representative was a brisk woman with a tablet, and the closing agent, the person who would actually walk us through the documents and confirm the title, was a man named Theodore Brandt, mid-50s, reading glasses on a cord. The unhurried manner of someone who had closed 1,000 of these and trusted the paperwork more than the people. He shook everyone's hand. He laid out the file. He explained the process in a flat, kind voice. He'd verify identities, review the title commitment, walk through the loan terms, and collect signatures. "Before we begin," Brandt said, sliding on his glasses, "let me just confirm the ownership of records so we're all working from the same page." My father settled back. Comfortable. He thought he knew this part. He didn't. Brandt turned to a page in his file, ran his finger down it, and paused. His eyebrows drew together very slightly. He read it again. "I'm sorry," he said, looking up. "I want to make sure I have this right before we go further." The room was very quiet. "This title has held a single owner for the past 6 years," Brant said. "Why is the loan drawn as though there are 3? For a moment, nobody moved." My father laughed. The easy laugh of a man certain there'd been a clerical mistake. 3 owners, my wife, myself, and my daughter. It's a family building, has been for 30 years. Brant looked back at his page. "Mr. Hartwell, the recorded deed shows 1 owner. The property was conveyed in full 6 years ago to a single individual. There's no joint tenny on record. No transfer to you or Mrs. Hartwell. Not at any point. That's not possible," my father said. The laugh was gone. "We've owned that building for—" "Sir, I'm reading the county record." Brant's voice stayed flat and patient. "The title is clean, and it's held by 1 name." The lender's representative leaned in. Tablet forgotten. "Whose name?" Brant looked down, then up, and his eyes found me at the end of the table. "Henrietta Vivian Hartwell." The silence after that was the loudest thing I have ever heard. My mother's hand went to her pearls. Lawson's phone lowered slowly, his face blank like a screen that had gone dark. I watched my father's face do something I'd never seen it do. For 1 second, before the anger arrived, there was pure confusion. The look of a man whose floor has tilted, who's reaching for a railing that was never there. He looked at Brant. He looked at the page. He looked at me. And I understood in that second that he genuinely had not known. He hadn't been lying to me about the building being his. He'd been lying to himself for so long that he'd come to believe it. And the deed in Brand's hand wasn't just taking a building away from him. It was taking away the version of himself he'd narrated for 30 years. I should have felt triumphant. Mostly, I felt tired. My father turned to me. "What did you do?" "Not a question. An accusation." "I didn't do anything," I said. My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady. "Grandma did." "That's a lie," my father said. He pushed his chair back and stood, and the easy charm was gone, replaced by something raw. My mother would never have cut me out. She was sick. She was confused. "Whatever you got her to sign, she signed it 6 years ago," I said. She wasn't sick yet. She wasn't confused, and she didn't tell me until after she was gone. "You're lying." I reached into my bag. I set the certified copy of the deed on the table and slid it down the length of it, the way he had slid the loan packet toward me 3 weeks before. "Recording stamps at the top," I said. "County seal. You can read it yourself." Brant picked it up before my father could. He examined it, nodded slowly. "This matches the title commitment. It's the recorded instrument." My father snatched it from him and read it. I watched his eyes move across the line where the owner's name goes, and I watched the exact second the building stopped being his in his own mind. The second he understood it had never been his at all. "This is fraud," he said. But his voice cracked on it. "She manipulated an old woman. I was 25 when she signed it." I said quietly, "I didn't even know it existed." "You can subpoena her lawyer. He's expecting you. His name is Gerald Whitfield, and he kept notes on every conversation he ever had with her." That was the first stronger piece of evidence, and I watched it land. But my father was a man who, when he should have retreated, always doubled down. And he did it now in a room full of witnesses with the record open on the table. "Fine," he snapped. "Fine. The deed says what it says, but she still owes this family. We raised her, we fed her. That building is our legacy, and she is going to sign that loan, or she is no daughter of mine." I want to describe the room because the room is the whole point of why my grandmother waited. Brant had gone very still and very professional, the way people do when a transaction has stopped being a transaction. He'd seen families come apart over closings before. I'd guess. He kept his hands flat on the file. He did not look away, and he did not look entertained. He looked like a man making sure he'd remember this accurately if anyone ever asked. The lender's representative. Her name was Miss Puit. I learned later, when she handed me her card on the way out, had stopped pretending to take notes. She was watching my father, the way you watch a man who has just told you without realizing it that he is not a person you want to be on a contract with. And my mother had not moved, not 1 inch. She was looking at the certified deed on the table like it might rearrange itself into a different name if she stared hard enough. The lender's representative shifted in her seat. Mr. Hartwell, Brant said carefully, your daughter is the sole owner. No one else can pledge this property. And she would be pledging it not for herself, but to cover. He glanced at the loan file. A third party's existing debts. I have to advise her plainly that she is under no obligation to do that. Just sign it. Henrietta, Lawson said, his voice climbing. You don't even need the money. The shop's yours. Fine. Congratulations. But I'm drowning here. I've got people I owe. Serious people. You think I can wait? You owe me. You've always owed me. I'm the son. The room went still in a new way. The lender's representative looked at Lawson. People you owe, she repeated. What kind of debts are we discussing exactly? Because the loan application listed business consolidation. Lawson realized too late what he'd said. It's personal. It's relevant, she said. If we're being asked to underwrite it? I opened my own folder. Then the plain manila one. Here's the part I want you to sit with for a second before I tell you what was inside. The whole room had just shifted. The lender had heard the word drowning. My father had been told on the record that he had no claim to the building he'd lived his life on top of. My mother was gripping her pearls. And the easiest thing in the world, the thing the old Henrietta would have done, was to let it end there. The loan was already dead. I'd already won, if winning was the word. What would you have done? Reached for the folder or left it closed and walked out. Clean. Pause for a second and decide. Because what? Chose said more about me than about them. I reached for the folder since we're confirming the record. I said, this might help. I laid the pages out one by one. The way you deal cards, the repair invoices for the building, all in my name. The years of texts where my father called the building ours proof in his own words that he'd believed it was, which made the she manipulated grandma's story fall apart, because you don't get manipulated out of something you spent 6 years certain you already had. And Last's loan application from 2 years ago, the one he'd left on my counter with the very long line of figures are his actual obligations, I said. Not business consolidation. He wanted to borrow against my building to cover them. And he wanted my parents to pressure me into pledging it as a guarantor for a property I solely own. I just wanted everyone in this room to understand what was actually being asked of me. Lawson lunged for the application. I let him take it. It didn't matter. Everyone had already seen the number. And the lender's representative had a copy of his real file in her own bag. You kept this for 2 years, he said. His voice had gone thin. You photographed you were spying on me. You left it on my counter, I said. You always leave things on my counter and expect me to mind them. I minded it. My father tried to seize the narrative back. This is private family business. None of this belongs in this room. Mr. Hartwell, Brant said without heat. Your son just told a federal lender on the record that the stated purpose of the loan was false. That doesn't belong in a family. It belongs in a file. The lender's representative read the application. Her expression closed like a door. She slid her tablet back into her bag. I think she said that this loan is not going to proceed today. She looked at Lawson, then at my father. And given what's been disclosed, I'll be noting the application as withdrawn for misrepresentation. I'd encourage all of you to seek your own counsel. Misrepresentation. The word landed on my father like a coat too heavy to hold. He had spent his life being the most respectable man in every room. And in this room, the youngest professional at the table had just used a word about his family that would follow the name he was so proud of. That should have been the end of it. The loan was dead. The truth was on the record. Any reasonable person would have sat down. My father did not sit down. He turned on me, and the thing that had been under the charm for 31 years finally showed its whole face. "You ungrateful!" His voice shook after everything. "We gave you that shop. We gave you a place in this family. You were nothing." "You were the backup. And the second you get a piece of paper, you turn on your own blood to humiliate me in front of strangers." "I didn't humiliate you," I said. "I read the documents. Your grandmother always loved you best." He spat. "And look what it made you. A thief in a navy dress." My mother spoke for the first time since the deed had come out. Quietly to me. "Henrietta, don't do this to your brother. He's family. The shop can carry this. Please, for the family." "Mom," I said, "do you hear what you're asking? You're asking me to mortgage the only thing I own to pay debts I didn't make for a man who's never worked a day because he was born first and male. You've been asking me some version of that my whole life. The only thing that's different today is that for once, I can say no and have it actually mean something." "He's your brother," she said again helplessly, as if the word were a key that had always worked before. "And I'm your daughter," I said. "When was the last time that meant you protected me?" She had no answer. I watched her search for one and not find it. And for the first time in my life, I saw my mother understand that there might not be one. And there it was, the whole machine laid bare on a conference table on the 9th floor. My brother, who told me I owed him an hour earlier, now staring at his shoes. For 31 years, I had filled that silence by making myself smaller. This time, I let it sit. I let the lender hear it. I let the closing agent hear it. I let my parents hear themselves. Then I closed my folder. If you've ever had a family that called your boundaries a betrayal, that treated the day you stopped sacrificing as the day you became the villain, I think you already know what I felt sitting in that chair. If this reached you tonight, I hope it reaches the next person who needs it. "I'm not pledging the building," I said. "Not today, not ever, not to cover debts I didn't make." "Then you're no daughter of mine," my father said again, louder, as if volume could make it true. "That's been true for a long time," I said. "I just used to do the math your way." I stood up. Brant was already gathering the loan documents into a neat, dead stack. The lender's representative was on her feet, eager to be gone. My mother was crying without sound. Lawson hadn't moved. I picked up my certified deed and slid it back into my bag. And my fingers found Vivian's letter, still sealed. The one Whitfield had told me to open on the day the family found out. This was the day I opened it right there, standing at the end of the table while they watched. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Small, steady, certain. "Henrietta," it read, "if you're reading this, they've reached for the building and you found out what I always suspected, that the only one who ever truly carried this family was the one they called the help. I didn't give you the shop to make you rich. I gave it to you because a deed is the one kind of love your father can't talk you out of. Don't let them rent you anymore. You were never the spare. You were the one who showed up. Lock the door at night and know it's yours. Grandma." I read it to myself. I didn't read it aloud. Some things aren't for the room, but I looked up when I finished. And I think they saw on my face exactly what it said. "Don't ever call the shop ours again." I told my father. It was hers. Now it's mine. You can come in and buy a coffee like anyone else. I walked out. Behind me, the glass door side shut on the loudest silence of my life. I made it to the elevator before my hands started shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer strangeness of having done it, of having sat in a room while my father called me a thief and my mother begged me to burn, and of having stayed in my chair, stayed in my voice, and walked out with the building and the truth both still mine. In the lobby. Ms. Puit, the lender's representative, caught up with me. She handed me her card. For what it's worth, she said. I've sat through a lot of these. Most people in your chair sign. They sign because the table makes them feel like they have to. She glanced back toward the elevators. You didn't. That's rarer than you'd think. Then she left, and I stood in the marble lobby of a building I'd never been in before, holding the card of the stranger who'd seen me more clearly in 20 minutes than my family had in 31 years. I didn't go back to the shop right away. I drove out to the cemetery instead. I hadn't been since the funeral. I found Vivian's stone, and I sat down on the grass in front of it in my navy dress, and I told her what had happened out loud, every part of it, like she was sitting at the steel table listening. When I got to the part about her letter, I stopped being able to talk for a while. That was the second time the control cracked. I let it. There was no one there to give me that look. You waited 6 years, I finally said. For me. So I'd have a fact. I pressed my hand flat against the cool granite the way I'd pressed it against the conference table. I waited too. Grandma! I didn't rush it. I didn't let the butter break through. The wind moved the grass. That was all. But it was enough. The fallout came the way these things do. Quietly at first. Then all at once. The loan never closed. The lender, having heard exactly what Lawson's debts were, pulled out entirely. Within a month, 2 of the serious people Lawson owed stopped being patient. He had to sell his car and move into my parents' spare room. The future of the family slept in a twin bed under a window. 33 years old, with no name left to carry but his own. There was a stretch in those first weeks where the phone didn't stop. My father called 11 times the first day. I didn't pick up. He left voicemails that moved through every register he had. First reasonable, then wounded, then furious, then near midnight, almost tender, telling me he was proud of how I'd grown up, that we could fix this, that family forgives. I listened to that one twice. Then I deleted it because I recognized it. It was the voice he used right before he asked for something. The tenderness was a withdrawal slip. My mother sent letters. Actual letters. In her good stationery because she knew I read those when she was younger and thought I still might. The first one said I'd humiliated the family in front of strangers. The second one 2 weeks later said she didn't understand where she'd gone wrong with me. Neither one used the word sorry. I kept them in the drawer with my grandmother's letter, which is its own kind of comment on the difference between the 2 women. My father told everyone who would listen that I'd stolen the family building. It worked for about 3 weeks. Then people started doing the math the rest of us already had. That a woman can't steal a building that was legally recordedly deeded to her years before anyone noticed. A cousin asked him at a barbecue why Grandma's lawyer had a folder of notes if it had all been a manipulation. My father stopped getting invited to barbecues. Aunt Loretta, my mother's sister, the only one in the family who'd ever paid for her own coffee at the shop, called me. She didn't take a side exactly. She just said, "Your grandmother told me once that she'd made sure you'd be all right." I didn't know what she meant. I do now. She'd be glad it worked. Then she asked if she could still come in on Saturdays for the cardamom buns, and I told her she could come in any day she liked. And she does. The closing agent, Theodore Brandt, did one more thing I didn't expect. About a week after, an envelope arrived at the shop. Inside was a short note on title company letterhead and a clean second copy of the recorded deed, certified in case I ever needed a spare. The note read, "Martwell, in 30 years, I've watched a great many people sign things they shouldn't because the room told them to. It was a privilege to watch someone not. Your grandmother chose well, T. Brandt." I keep that note at the frame, tucked behind the deed. A stranger's handwriting next to my grandmother's. Both of them telling me the same thing she'd spent 6 years trying to make sure I'd hear. Lawson's debts didn't vanish. Of course, without my building to launder them through. He had to face them as they were. He filed for bankruptcy in the fall. It was, by every account I heard, humiliating and slow, and exactly the kind of consequence my parents had spent his whole life buying him out of. I didn't gloat. I didn't send money. For the first time, the math finally ran the way math is supposed to. The person who made the debt was the person who carried it. My mother called me once a month after, not to apologize, to ask if I'd reconsider helping Lawson now that things had calmed down. No, I said. He's your brother. He is, I agreed. And the building is mine. Both of those can be true. After everything this family gave you, you gave me a job I wasn't paid fairly for and a place at the table where I wasn't allowed to speak, I said. Grandma gave me the building. Let's not confuse the two. She was quiet a long time. Then she said the thing that I think she'd been wanting to say since the conference room. You were always cold, Henrietta. Even as a girl. You never needed anyone. And there it was. The wound named by the person who made it. I'd spent my whole life being told I didn't need love by the people who made sure I never got any, so they'd never have to feel bad about it. I needed all of you, I said, every single day. You just decided it was cheaper to call me cold than to notice. She didn't call again for a long time. I changed the locks on the shop, not out of spite, because Vivian had told me to, in her way. Lock the door at night and know it's yours. So, I did. I had a new set cut, and I kept all of them. And that simple act of keeping my own keys felt like something I'd been waiting my whole life to be allowed to do. The week after, I did something I'd been afraid to do for 6 years. I went to the county recorder's office myself, and I pulled the deed, and I read my own name on a public record in a public building, with strangers all around me who had no opinion about whether I deserved it. It was just a fact sitting in a drawer in a government office the way Whitfield said it would be. I stood there for a while. Then I paid for a certified copy of my own. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted one that was mine and not the one Whitfield gave me. I keep it framed in the back office now behind the desk, where I can see it when I'm doing the payroll that used to feel like a chore and now feels like keeping the lights on in a place that's mine. It's late summer now. The awning is still green. I repainted it myself this year the way she did, and it took me 3 afternoons, and I didn't ask anyone for help. Hartwell's is busy. I hired 2 more people. I gave the morning baker a raise and Sundays off because I know exactly what it costs to be the one who opens at 4:40 and never gets thanked. I put my grandmother's photograph by the register. Her at the steel table, flour to the elbows, not smiling for the camera. Smiling at the dough. Regulars ask who she is. I tell them. The woman who built this. They never ask about my parents. To anyone who walks in off the street. This has only ever been my place and hers. There's a kind of justice in that. 2. That the people who wanted the name on the window so badly will never be the name on the window. I started doing one thing my grandmother never did. On the first Saturday of every month, I run a baking class in the back for kids whose families can't pay for one. The first month, 2 kids came. Last month, it was 9. Crowded around the steel table she taught me at. Getting flour everywhere. Laughing too loud. Walt, the retired bus driver, volunteers to help wash the trays. Priya, the night nurse, brings her daughter. It's the first thing I've ever built that nobody can put a lien on. My father and I don't speak. He came in once in July, stood at the counter, and ordered a coffee without meeting my eye. I made it. I charged him for it. He left $2 and didn't say thank you. And somehow that was the most honest interaction we'd had in years. He hasn't come back. I hear from Aunt Loretta that he's smaller now, that the bluster has gone out of him, that without the building to stand on, he isn't quite sure who he is. I don't celebrate it. But I don't lie awake over it either. A man who spends 30 years renting out his daughter shouldn't be surprised when she finally reads the lease. Lawson texts sometimes. Short things. Hope the shop's good. I answer. Short things back. He got a job. A real one. Hourly. at a warehouse on the edge of town. Aunt Loretta says he's never complained about it once, which may be the most surprising part of this whole story. A few weeks ago, he texted something different. Not hope the shop's good. Just, I'm sorry for all of it. You don't have to answer. I haven't answered yet. I'm not sure I will. But I haven't deleted it either. Whether that ever becomes a brother, I don't know. Some doors open slowly, if they open at all. I'm not holding the handle for him, but I'm not bolting it either. People ask if I regret it. The closing, the folder, the deed slid down the table. I don't. I regret the 4 years I spent holding a paper that already said I belonged and feeling like I didn't. My grandmother knew something I had to learn the hard way. A family will tell you that love is something you earn by how much of yourself you give away. That a son carries the name and a daughter just rents her place at the table. But a deed doesn't care who they wanted you to be. It only records what's true. Mine says I'm the owner. I open the door every morning with my own key. And the line where it accounts has held exactly one name for 6 years. It's mine. It was always going to be mine.